Good evening. On tonight's program, we will discuss the rise of the BDS movement on college campuses and elected officials' legitimization of these movements and these groups. So I want to encourage you to bring your kids, if you've got high school kids or college students in the house, or encourage them to tune in tonight to listen, to see what we have in store, because the issues that we're going to address and the things we're going to talk about tonight directly will affect them on college campuses, and we want to help equip them so they can stand against this movement. So good evening. I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, your host for PJTN Online. I want to encourage you to visit our website at pjtn.org. If you're not familiar with us, our mission statement is to educate Christians about our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. We accomplish that mission by producing award-winning programs, and then we distribute those programs around the globe to 2.6 billion viewers, educating, informing, activating Christians to take action. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight as well. We do distribute our programs to 21 global media partners around the world. And we're excited about that because we hear from our viewers all over the globe. I received an email earlier today from members in India who are tuning in to our Daystar TV and God TV. And we're excited to hear some of the comments and feedback that we're getting from people all over the world, Christians all over the world who are tuning in. I also want to encourage you to become a PJTN Watchman tonight if you have not done so already. You're here on Facebook. You can always like us and share our PJTN online program and our organization with your family and friends. And of course, people ask all the time, so what is the role of a PJTN Watchman? And how can I get involved? Well, we take the watchman seriously as God does. In Ezekiel chapter 33, God warned Ezekiel that the watchman was to warn the inhabitants of the city when they saw the enemy advancing. And if the watchman failed to warn the inhabitants and any innocent blood was spilled, it would be required of that watchman. However, if the watchman warned the inhabitants and the inhabitants refused to heed the warning and innocent blood is shed, it will be required of them. But it is our responsibility to speak up. We must warn people. And of course, that's what we're here to do, to sound the alarm, to blow the shofar, to remind Christians about what happened in Nazi Germany. And people think, oh, it can't happen again. We're here in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, as you're going to find out on our program tonight, that we do have a problem with the rise of anti-Semitism, and we've got several stories we're going to cover about that. But the other part of being a watchman is the responsibility of helping us to communicate to Christians around the globe, and that happens through your financial support. A watchman, you can sign up to become a monthly watchman for just $20 a month to help us reach our goals, to continue to reach Christians around the world. God told the prophet Elijah that he had reserved 7,000 who had not bowed their knee to Baal. And unfortunately, today in Christianity, the teaching of replacement theology, which is false doctrine, it's false teaching, is continuing to make a comeback in Christian circles. And it's one of the two questions that I get asked most frequently is, what is replacement theology and is it biblical? So we're going to talk about that also tonight. You know, it's amazing to hear the people from all over the world that we hear from and the responses about our program. And most recently, we were contacted by a woman in Johannesburg, South Africa, who wants to start a PJTN chapter there. So we are in the process of talking and trying to set something up. And I hope that we will see more efforts like her effort. We have PJTN chapters here in the United States, but South Africa will be our first international chapter. So we're delighted. This is a woman who's been tuning into our program. She's been watching our Focus on Israel shows on God TV and on Daystar. And she decided that she was going to get involved and she was going to stand as a watchman to warn the inhabitants of her community about this rising threat and why Christians must stand with our Jewish brethren. Again, all we need, our goal is 7,000 watchmen for 2018. Just $20 a month is all it takes to help. And you can go to our website at pjtn.org/donate to make your contribution tonight. We do believe that that anti-Semitism is fueled, especially in the Christian church, out of ignorance. And a lot of that ignorance comes from a lack of biblical understanding or knowledge. Too often, many Christians sit in churches on Sunday and they allow their pastor to teach them what they are to think and what they are to believe. But we are also told in the scriptures that we are not to put our faith in any man, that we all will stand before Almighty God. We're not going to, when we go and stand before Him, we can't, justify our actions by saying, well, this is what my pastor taught me. No, we have the Word of God. We have the internet. We have ways of obtaining information and study for ourselves. And so it's critically important that we as Christians study to show ourselves approved. The purpose of our award-winning programs at PJTN is to confront that ignorance with biblical truth. Too often, many Christians, again, because they were born in and grew up in denominational churches, and they've accepted the doctrines and the theology of that specific denomination and never questioned it. And of course, why would they question it? Because they hear this repeated message from their pastors every Sunday, and they don't take the time to study the Bible themselves. And so they're not going to know whether what their pastor is teaching them is biblically accurate or not. God told the prophet Obadiah that He would wipe out the descendants of Edom in the last days because they stood by while their brother Jacob, or Israel, was held in captivity, and they did nothing. There will be an accounting one day, ladies and gentlemen. We will have to stand before Almighty God, and we will be judged based on how we treated Israel. God is going to judge the church because we stood by historically during the time of the pogroms, during the Spanish Inquisition, during the Holocaust, and by and large, with the rise of anti-Semitism today, Christians are standing by silently, and we cannot afford to do that. We stood by in Germany when Hitler rose to power, and the church, with the exception of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller, Corrie ten Boom, Father Bruno, Irena Sendler, these are all examples, Christians who sacrificed their lives. Definitely their livelihood. We know Oskar Schindler also. But these were Christians who knew that what was happening to the Jews was not right. And they risked their lives, their families. Some perished even in the concentration camps. Some were killed because they were helping the Jews. But it's so critically important that we look back at what happened historically and how those same things can happen again. We're already seeing it, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at what's happening on the college campuses today by professors who are spewing this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel venom that is inciting violence and encouraging violence by these young people, it's very similar to what happened in Germany before Hitler came to power. Ladies and gentlemen, the professors in the university were already teaching these views of Jews, that Jews were not human, that they were vermin, and they should be treated differently than human beings, than the white Aryan race. So when Hitler came to power, the universities, the professors had already done the work. They had already laid the foundation in which Hitler could build upon. And we know, history has written about the Hitler Youth. And so it's very, very important that we understand the times that we're living in and what our role, what our destiny is, because God didn't bring us into the world 500 years ago or even 2,000 years ago. He brought us into the world now. And there is a reason why He put us here. And there is also a responsibility of what we are called to do as well. with just a minimum donation of just $20 a month to help us continue to get this message out, ladies and gentlemen, you can help stand with PJTN and stand against this growing threat in our community. So please go to pjtn.org/donate. Now, for the news headlines this week, there's a lot of news going on, and I want to just try to recap on some of the things, and I'm going to talk a little bit more through the program about these issues. But the most pressing thing I want to talk about is the global hysteria over the recent passage of Israel's nation-state law. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think about this, because we hear, oh, how horrible Israel is, that they're making the state of Israel a Jewish state. What about all the other people? Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we look throughout the Middle East, we see countries that are Arab, and they're also Islamic. That is their religion. And they call themselves or refer to themselves as an Islamic state. In fact, in many of these Islamic states, Christians are being persecuted. But where is the outcry about that? And that's been going on since those countries were founded. So to condemn Israel for being what it obviously is, the other thing we need to think about is in Israel. In fact, if you've seen our Boycott This documentary, if you haven't, I want to encourage you, go to our PJTN.org website, go to the store page and order a copy. Show it to your children, your high school kids, your kids that are going off to college. But we did a segment in that documentary called A Tale of Two Cities, where we focused on Bethlehem and Nazareth, because these are two cities that we as Christians can relate to. In Bethlehem, we know that that's the city of our Savior's birth. And of course, the Palestinian Authority now govern over that portion of the city. However, in Nazareth, Nazareth is governed by the Israeli government. And in the city of Bethlehem, over 80% of Christians have fled. They've left Bethlehem. Not because of the Israelis, but if you listen to the Palestinian news or even the liberal mainstream media, they will tell you that Christians have fled because of what Israel, the IDF, is doing to them. No, ladies and gentlemen, the IDF has pulled out of Bethlehem. It is the Palestinian Authority that governs. It is the Palestinian Authority that allows Muslim Arabs to persecute Christians in these communities. However, in Nazareth, governed by the Israeli government, you have Christians, Jews, and Muslims who live together. We were also fortunate to interview Arabs who were Muslim and Christians, Druze, and Bedouin in this documentary. And these are all citizens of Israel. So here we are, citizens. This was before the Prime Minister passed this, or the Knesset voted to adopt this Jewish state legislation that the state of Israel is a Jewish state. These people, Muslims, Arabs, Christians, have all been living, Druze and Bedouins have all been living in Israel. They serve in the IDF. If they were being persecuted by the state of Israel, why would they serve in the Israeli military? I mean, these are common sense things that we have to think about when we hear this condemnation publicly coming out against them. And so I just wanted to address that Israel should be allowed to say that they are a Jewish state. We in the United States call ourselves a Judeo-Christian nation. And you know what? We are. It was Jews and Christians that helped founded the United States of America. And of course, because we're a Judeo-Christian nation, we still allow people of other faiths and races, nationalities to come and live here. But of course, we allow that, or we were supposed to allow that, through proper immigration channels. And that's a whole nother story for another show. But ladies and gentlemen, we have to think about, persecuting Israel and condemning them for stating the obvious. It doesn't change the status of the people, the citizens who live there. They still they still have homes, they have jobs, they have synagogues or churches or mosques that they attend. and their children go to school. They enjoy the public education of the Israeli school system. So it's so frustrating to hear how this is worded, but nobody thinks. And even the world leaders are not even thinking. They're not thinking about all these other countries who call themselves Islamist, and it's the Islamist countries that are condemning Israel for calling it a Jewish state. So anyhow, I just wanted to just bring that up tonight and talk about that, because that has made the news, and I commend the Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, for this bold initiative. And remember again, Israel is a Western democracy. They voted, the majority, in fact, there's stories, the majority of Israelis, I think it was 58% I read in one poll, 58% of Israelis support what the Prime Minister did. So they voted, their representatives voted on their behalf, and they passed it. And now the world is telling Israel, no, you can't be a Jewish state. You have no right to declare yourself a Jewish state. It's absurd. But this happens because, after all, it's Israel. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is this video that is circulating on the internet, and we're going to show it tonight. It's a short clip. It's about 3 minutes long, but it's important to see on a couple of levels. Number one, it addresses this nation-state issue. So as you watch this video, think about what I just said, and you see this young actor who's on camera talking about this issue in front of the wall in Israel. Of course, they call it an apartheid wall. Israel calls it a security wall, because thousands of Jews were murdered before that wall went up. They had to put some type of barrier to keep buses from blowing up and Jews being mutilated in the city. Whole families, even in their homes at night, in the middle of the night. So I want you to take a look at this this documentary, or this short clip video about from an Arab perspective about this recent nation-state law.
There's a new law in Israel which, among other things, defines it as a Jewish state and grants certain rights exclusively to Jews. Here's what you need to know. Firstly, Israel doesn't have a constitution. Instead, it has basic laws, which are foundational and much harder to repeal than other laws. This is one such law. It states that the right to exercise national self-determination in the state of Israel is unique to Jewish people. So, what is self-determination? It's simply defined as the process in which a person controls their own life. Now, this law says that this is unique to only Jewish people, and that's what many people here in Israel and internationally have a problem with. Christians and Muslims and any other non-Jew living here are now essentially second-class citizens, something that they feel they've been for decades, but at least now it's legally enshrined.
Actually, by raising the Palestinian aspiration for self-determination and only see this land as available only for the Jewish narrative and the Jewish self-determination is actually an attempt to completely finish off the Palestinian struggle. And I think it's also very dangerous the way settlements is also being promoted and encouraged.
The law also encourages the building of settlements, saying, quote, "The state views the development of Jewish settlement as a national value and will act to encourage and promote its establishment and consolidation." These Jewish settlements are often built on stolen Palestinian land and are illegal under international law. There's something else to point out here. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance recently began pushing a new working definition of anti-Semitism, which includes, quote, "denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination." So, if someone is against settlement building on Palestinian land, which is illegal under international law, then they could be labeled as an anti-Semite because they're denying Jewish self-determination. And being anti-Semitic is illegal in many countries, so it's possible that calling out Israel for its illegal settlement building could land you in legal trouble.
So that means there is no more democracy. Whatever they used to say there is democracy back then, now there is no more democracy. And they are showing you or showing us like the direct face that we are the third grade We are not the first, or let's say it's not even middle class. We are the last class ever.
Now, those who support the law say that it's their right to define Israel the way they want. They say that other European countries define their nationhood and legalize the self-determination of their country's majority ethnic group, so why can't Israel? The people who oppose the law say that it's racist and legally defines Israel as an apartheid state, one with a certain set of laws for the Jewish people and another set of laws for everyone else. Again, if you're Christian or Muslim or anything else, you don't have the right to self-determination in Israel. Only Jews do. So, what do you think?
If the choice is one state, Israel can either be Jewish or democratic. It cannot be both. And it won't ever really be at peace.
So look at some of the buzzwords that this guy is using. Look at what he's accusing Israel of doing, occupying Palestinian land. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why our understanding of the Bible, biblical history, God's covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants forever is so critically important. We can't look at political situations or what's happening politically in the world, especially in the Middle East, through a secular mindset. We have to look at especially the Middle East through a biblical perspective. That is so critically important, because if just an average person who doesn't have a lot of biblical knowledge or any at all would sit and watch this video, he would think how horrible these Jews are. Even the fact that he took on the issue, the international issue of defining what anti-Semitism is, he condemned that. You all know that here in Tennessee, we introduced the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which is very similar to what he's condemning, having a clear definition, because it is in here, especially not just here in the United States, but around the world, anti-Semitism is on the rise. There are places in Paris where Jews cannot even go into the communities. They're moving out to the outlying areas of the cities. And for those who are not staying, are going back, are making aliyah and going to Israel to move there because it's not safe for them. This is, even here in the United States, we see a rise of anti-Semitic incidents, especially on our college campuses, being fueled by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And yes, do we need to have a clear definition as to what constitutes anti-Semitism? Our U.S. State Department felt like we needed to. In fact, that office, that department monitors anti-Semitism using that definition around the globe to determine anti-Semitic incidents. And here in the United States, we have a civil rights law that includes that if a Jewish student on a campus does not feel safe, then that student's civil rights is being violated. And there should be a federal investigation launched. But here, this young man, again, looks clean, nice, polished, hip, seems to know what he's talking about. But it's the little buzzwords, it's the way he frames the discussion, not from a biblical perspective, but from what is politically expedient and what is based on lies. Bottom line. There's another video, a series of videos I want to show you from our dear friend Joseph Farah, who is the director, chief editor of WorldNet Daily, or WND.com. If you are not familiar with WND.com, they should be one of the go-to websites you go to in order to get accurate information, news. Joseph, his family is from Syria. He's Syrian-born. And his parents came here to the United States, immigrants who came the legal way, and now he provides such an incredible contribution to our country. And I want to show you some of the clips. I had the honor of doing an interview with him some time ago, but even that interview is still relevant even today. Take a look.
How can people be critical of what Israel does on a security basis when Israel is one of the most open and free countries in the entire world for all people? Muslims, Christians, Jews, etc. Even though it's a Jewish state, it's an open society where everybody has citizenship rights, voting rights, they can serve in the Knesset and so forth. And now you contrast that with what is developing in the Palestinian Authority, and it's a remarkable, stark contrast. And now this is something I think most Americans, if they're presented with these facts, which they are not generally through the media, it is a compelling contrast, one they can begin to understand. I never really expected to see us reach the state we're in right now. Not only the entire world is lined up against Israel, but even a very strong and growing element within the church. How do we combat that? It's a spiritual problem. It's a problem of the world, a perception problem. Some people, when you lay out the facts to them, when you lay out the intellectual argument, the historical perspectives, they begin to get it. But that's not going to work within the church. We really need to understand, where does our salvation come from? Who does it come through? Why is Yeshua our Savior? Without the historical, spiritual background of Israel, it makes no sense. And so we've really got to make that dynamic felt in the church. I'm encouraged by the Hebrew Roots movement, which is really catching fire in America and throughout the world right now. That may be the antidote to this virulent anti-Semitism that is spreading in the church, because you can't be an anti-Semite as a Christian, as a true Christian, in my opinion, because that means you hate your Savior. It's just that simple. Without the roots, our faith has no legitimacy. We are grafted into the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that has always been, to me, self-evident. The more you get into the Bible, the more evident it is. But I don't understand this idea that is spreading like wildfire through the church right now. I think it comes from two essential problems. One is a spiritual problem. The other is that folks are just subject to the international propaganda machine of the world. And they're being hoodwinked by what the world is determining is the truth about the Middle East and Israel's legitimacy. It's the old story of, you tell a big lie often enough and keep repeating it, people believe it. And that's what we've seen with the Palestinian issue at its core. How can people...
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I enjoyed having it with Joseph Farah. He's so knowledgeable and he's so spot on. He obviously is a man of tremendous faith. He understands the Hebraic roots of the Christian faith and our responsibility to our Jewish brethren. He knows about the covenant that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that covenant is eternal, and that we have a Jewish Messiah, and that Jewish Messiah is going to come and rule and reign from the city of Jerusalem. And we know that there will be priests in that day who will be serving with Yeshua in the temple, on the Temple Mount. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so important that again, that we study the Bible so that we know. In fact, I share a lot of times with my students, when we do our Bible study, I remind them that the Bible is a book written to Israel, for Israel, and about Israel. And we, as Gentiles in the faith, were grafted in through a Jewish Messiah to the Commonwealth of Israel. Paul talked about this. This is not something that you just find in the Old Testament. It's throughout the Scriptures. In fact, the Bible is so beautifully laid out because it starts in Genesis 12 with this covenant that God made with Abram when he told him to come out of Ur of the Chaldees, go to a land that I will show you. And he took him to the land of Canaan, and he made a promise. And we know that he put Abraham to sleep, and he cut that deal. And that deal he cut with himself so that it could never be broken. He would never go back on his word. And so when we look, here we live in 2018, and we watch the evening news, and we watch some of the talking heads, and we read some of these articles on the internet, and we watch videos like the one with this young man. And we think, how in the world could we get this so wrong? But ladies and gentlemen, you know, Satan is the author of lies. And all it takes is just a truth with a little twist to make it into a lie, to make it false. And that's why we're here today. That's why we started PJTN, proclaiming justice to the nations. It's why we are producing award-winning programs and documentaries. Again, go to the website, look at our store page. We have got a lot of historically documented films that you can watch, you can tune into, or watch at home with your children, with family, with friends, with your Bible study group. Share it at your church. Have a conversation about this, because we are living in the last days, and it's important that we understand what's happening. I want to just move on. One of the other things I want to ask you all to please keep Israel in your prayers. I don't know if any of you have the Red Alert app. I've downloaded it to my phone. And so whenever there is a missile launched into Israel, I immediately go to pray against that missile, that it will not hit its intended target, and that it would fall back on the head of the enemy who sent it. And apparently Israel has had to sustain 70 missiles just today. This is not yesterday or the preceding days or weeks, because this has been going on for many, many months now. But just in the last day, I received an article coming across the wire from the Jerusalem Post. It says, Israelis in shelters as rocket launches continue throughout the night. And the article states rocket launches from the Gaza Strip towards Israeli towns in the south continued throughout the night, keeping the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip in shelters till the early hours of the morning. Hamas fired over 70 rockets, 11 of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome. In response, the IDF targeted Hamas terror cells and tunnels, reportedly killing Ali, who is reportedly the son of senior Hamas commander Abu Anas Gandor. 17 Israelis were injured in the rocket attacks. And of course, this is a developing story. So ladies and gentlemen, please be praying for our Jewish brethren and speaking out. You know, this is an election year. Many of you will probably be going to town hall meetings with your congressmen and senators. You should ask them where they are on allowing this to happen. This should not go on. Yes, the United States has pulled funding from the Palestinian Authority, but enough is enough. There needs to be President Trump needs to encourage Nikki Haley to go to the UN floor and call for the abstention of what the Palestinian Authority is doing. There is rumor, and I saw an article earlier today, it's a developing story as well, but there is rumor that European leaders are working with the Palestinian Authority to help shore up their infrastructure, to give them the government that they need, despite what Israel is doing, and they have not consulted the Israelis. So, you know, again, it's like a powder keg over there. It always is. The other issue I wanted to talk about, because we have been talking about the rise of anti-Semitism. For those of you who follow the Anti-Defamation League, back in 2017, they put out a report that over almost 70%, we saw an increase of almost 70% anti-Semitic incidents in the United States in 1 year. 1 year. This isn't Germany. This isn't even Europe. This is the United States of America. If you were to ask people, that same year there was a poll done, and in the poll the question asked was, do you support Israel over the Palestinian Authority? Guess how many Americans weighed in on that, and the percentage that supported Israel was 70%. So you have 70% of Americans who stand with Israel against the Palestinian Authority, and then you have an almost 70% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. Where's that coming from? Ladies and gentlemen, it's coming from our schools, our universities. For those of you who have been following PJTN, if you're on our mailing list, you know this. And if you haven't signed up to get on our mailing list, I want to encourage you. Again, go to pjtn.org. Get on the mailing list so you know what's going on, not just in your community or in your state or in this country, but around the globe. It will be a great resource for you to be able to pray and also help you to get involved as a watchman. Again, if you're watching this program, you care. And if you feel that God is speaking to you right now about becoming a watchman, signing up to become a PJTN watchman in your community, all it takes is just being engaged and developing relationships with the Jewish community and bringing them together with the Christian community, whether it be through your church, whether it be through yourself. I just started this whole mission on my own because I saw, after studying the Bible, that God had a plan for Israel and that the church didn't understand what that plan was because I had been taught about replacement theology. I was raised Catholic, and so I remember as a Catholic hearing that the Jews were the Christ killers. So I knew that there was these innuendos and these comments about the Jews growing up. But when I saw in the Bible that those lies and that disinformation campaign by Christians who don't even realize what they're doing. Many of these pastors do not even understand it, but it's because they come out of seminaries that promote this 2,000-year-old heresy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the program. But there is, if you all are watching this show from South Carolina, in Hilton Head Island, there is a Holocaust-denying candidate who is running for mayor. So if you are watching us from South Carolina and you happen to be in Hilton Head, I would encourage you to try to connect with this candidate who is running and hold him accountable for his views, because he publicly said that his personal views will not affect his views as a leader in the community. Well, I have a hard time believing that. If I were Jewish, I would not want to live in Hilton Head Island in South Carolina, nor would I want a vacation there if he ends up being the mayor. But again, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we determine who our elected officials are because we vote. And so, again, we should be paying attention to our school boards. You know, this is an election year. Some states are having primaries. Ohio just had their primary yesterday. There will be other states. Florida will have its primary later this month. But for those of you who haven't had your primaries, you need to find out where your school board, your superintendent of schools stands on the propaganda and textbooks. You need to find out where your state legislators stand on the issue of the BDS movement and the propaganda and the anti-Semitism that is growing on the college campuses in their state. You need to find out where your governor stands on these issues as well. And then on the federal level, you need to know who your senator and your state representative is, and you need to know where they stand on these issues, especially as it pertains to Israel and the Palestinian Authority and this constant barrage of attacks. Another candidate who is running, he's actually a U.S. Senator, Cory Booker. Cory Booker is an African-American from New Jersey, and he got himself in a bit of hot water because there was a picture. I want to have the screen. You see the picture on the screen. He was holding this sign about the wall and Mexico to Palestine, and the people that were there standing with him in the picture are BDS supporters. And of course, they're condemning the wall. And as I said previously, that wall has saved Jewish lives. Does Senator Booker, who they say is going to be running for president in the very near future, does Senator Booker, has he forgotten that during the civil rights movement, he's an African American, he knows the civil rights movement. Has he forgotten who stood with him or with his people in Selma, Alabama? It wasn't the white Southern evangelical church. No, it was the Jews. If you look back you can go on the internet and look at images of the civil rights marches. Look who was standing with them. It was Jews, men with kippahs, or having a Torah scroll in their hand, marching in streets like Selma, Alabama. It wasn't the white church. It was the Jews. The Jews stood with the African American community during their hour of greatest need when they were being persecuted in the United States, not a very proud part of our history. But now the Jews are facing similar persecutions. They are in their hour of greatest need. Where is the African American community? Where is Cory Booker on this? And shame on him that he would have the audacity to stand and take a photo with people who support the annihilation of the Jewish state and the Jewish people, wipe Israel off the map, and then hold a sign and condemn the very wall that protects Jewish lives in Israel. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there's anyone here watching from New Jersey, you should be contacting your senator and letting him know that you will not be supporting him. He now has publicly come out and said, oh, I didn't know what was on the sign. Really? Does he think we're that stupid? This is such an important issue. Here is a leader who is legitimizing a major BDS, anti-Semitic movement on college campuses. And he wants to one day run for president? And he's forgotten. And this is a man I saw years ago at an AIPAC conference. And I saw him when he was up and coming. He was supported by the Jewish community. There were Jewish philanthropists that were funding his campaign because they thought that he was true to his faith as a Christian, although one wonders now what Christian faith he practices, because it's embarrassing. As a Christian, it is embarrassing to see another Christian act the way he does, who buys into the propaganda and doesn't think before he stands to take a photo op. And that's my comment. Finally, I want to just finish up with another story, another anti-Semitic incident. Again, this is all happening here in the United States of America. There is a student at Stanford University. His name is Hamza Daoud, and you see his picture up on the screen. He posted on his Facebook page that he would personally fight Jews and Zionists on his campus. He hates them. And this is a student who served as a elected official of the student body. Now, I have heard that he has publicly resigned, but has he apologized for his statements? Absolutely not. Ladies and gentlemen, this kid is obviously a Muslim student going to school in one of our universities like Stanford, and he's spewing this venom on his Facebook page, and this is tolerated? No, I'm sorry. He should be kicked off the campus for even inciting this, because again, the campus is allowing, the leadership is allowing this kid to stay as a student on the campus and also cause the civil rights of the Jewish students on the campus to be denied. Because now these Jewish students, at least if I were a Jewish student, definitely as a Christian Zionist, I would feel threatened by these comments. And of course, he's allowed to stay on the campus and he has a right. Yes, of course he has a right to say whatever he wants to say. But you know what? He can do it on somebody else's campus, not on a state campus like Stanford. So that's my comment on the news. And I just want to encourage you all to pray about these things, stay informed, and again, get on our mailing list at pjtn.org so that you stay in touch with what's going on. And again, I hope you've liked this Facebook page, because that way you'll stay informed and you'll get some needed information as events unfold, and we can help you again, to stand against anti-Semitism in your community. So go to the website, pjtn.org, sign up to become a PJTN Watchman. And as I said earlier, we just need 7,000 PJTN Watchmen to sign up for 2018. Just $20 a month will provide us the needed funding to produce our programming to confront replacement theology, supersessionism, anti-Semitism, not just in the church, but also in the community as well, on college campuses and in our schools, because of course we're dealing with textbooks that are also promoting the same lies and disinformation that we see happening on our college campuses. It is replacement theology that has historically been the motivation behind Christian anti-Semitism. And of course, as I said earlier, it's ignorance that breeds that anti-Semitism. Many Christians have been taught that because the Jews rejected Jesus the Messiah, that God is done with Israel. He's done with the Jews. And so if that's true, and one of the questions, I received a question about this earlier this week, and we're going to talk about it to greater length in just a minute. But one of the things that Christians don't realize is that since the time of Christ, when the church started to split away from our Jewish roots, our Hebrew roots, and started to go off into their own destiny, forging their own path. We even look back at Constantine. You know, Constantine's mother. Constantine was the one that changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday, or the day of the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, because his mother was a sun god worshiper. This is all documented information, ladies and gentlemen. It's out there, but we have to find it. We have to seek it. We have to read to see what it was like back then. Even, you know, if we look at the early church, I always like to look at the book of Acts, chapter 15, when there was discussion over the Gentiles having to be circumcised. And when you get to the end of that conversation, Yaakov, who was Yeshua's brother, said to all those who were gathered, he said, tell these Gentile converts to do these 4 things. He didn't say, no, they don't have to be circumcised. He said, tell them to do these 4 things. And the 4 things that he told them were all Torah things, Torah principles: to stay away from blood, stay away from meat strangled, stay away from sexual immorality, and stay away from, the 4th one, sexual immorality, blood, strangled, and idolatry. Yaakov said, stay away from those 4 things, and then he said something very important. He said, because Moshe, or Moses, or Torah is preached in the synagogue every Shabbat. What Yaakov was saying, these Gentile converts are going to do these 4 things. They're going to come to hear the Torah portion every week in the synagogue, and they're going to eventually learn how to live, because the Torah is the model on how we are to conduct and live our lives. But of course, in some circles in Christianity, oh my gosh, that's the law, we can't keep that. Well, you know, 613 mitzvot, or commandments, not all of them are meant for all women, not all of them are meant for all men, not all of them are meant for everybody, because some are meant for priests. Do you see what I'm saying? We use the 10 Commandments, or we use the laws that God gave Israel as guidelines to conduct our lives, to live holy, set-apart lives. But unfortunately, in Christianity, we're not taught that. And it was there. That's where the first Gentile converts. And so I always ask pastors, I ask teachers, I ask Christians, you know, if it was okay for the early Gentiles to go to a synagogue to study the Torah of Moses every week, why don't we study that way now? Just a question, something to think about. But again, your partnership and financial support will go a long way to helping us to make this biblical mission possible. It is important that we teach our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren the importance of why the relationship with America and Israel must be strong, why we must teach our children about our Judeo-Christian heritage, where we came from. We cannot, ladies and gentlemen, understand where we're going if we don't understand where we've been. And that's an important part of teaching to our children. We're commanded by God to teach to the children the Torah, and we're also commanded to remind our children what he did for the Israelites when he took them out of Egypt under Pharaoh. So those are so important. We must protect the future of our children to pass to them our Judeo-Christian values. And of course, they're not going to be taught that anymore in our public schools, like for someone my age, 50 plus. We were taught these things. We were taught a different perspective. We were taught about the uniqueness of Israel and America and Israel's relationship. So again, it is because of your prayers and financial support that make this possible. So we will not keep silent, and we are on the front lines at PJTN, and of course it does come with the cost. So I'm personally asking you to please prayerfully consider joining me in this battle, coming out to the front lines and standing against this anti-Semitic threat in our communities. We can't fight the battle all over the world, but there are Christians all over the globe, 2.3 billion Christians, and if we could just reach them and remind them, don't tolerate anti-Semitism, we will be held accountable. God told the prophet Obadiah that in the last days he was going to wipe out the descendants of Edom because they stood by while their brother Jacob was held in captivity, and they did nothing. And if God is going to wipe out a whole people group, the Edomites, in the last days, because they stood by, church, how is God going to judge us? Because we have stood by throughout history. It's shameful and it's embarrassing because we should know our Bible. And so I'm grateful that you're tuned in here. So I'm asking you to join the battle. And of course, I want to show you another video about how you can get involved and you can help support this ministry. Take a look at this. This month marks the 70th anniversary of the historic Declaration of the State of Israel. God's sovereign hand can be seen all over this land. Included in the celebrations is the opening of the American Embassy right here in Jerusalem. In honor of this celebration, PJTN is offering a special 70th anniversary package, which includes a captivating new book and an award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. All right, so I want to close this time of study with out of the book of Joel, one of my favorite prophets. In fact, the title of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations is hidden in chapter 3, verse 9, where God told the prophet Joel, proclaim this to the nations, prepare for war. And that's what PJTN is. We are fighting a battle. It is war, and it's war for the survival of the nation of Israel and God's promise and his covenant to the Jewish people. And we know God can wipe Israel's enemies out in a second. But God is also using his people to do the work of the kingdom. And that's what we are doing at PJTN. God told the prophet Joel in chapter 1, verse 3, tell your children about it. Let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is so critically important as our kids are getting ready to go off to college, as they're getting ready to go back to school. Some of them may be homeschooling. We have a responsibility biblically to teach our children, to train them up in the way that they should go. Even if you don't have children and your children are grown, you have grandchildren and probably great-grandchildren. Our job doesn't stop because we've raised our children and they're all adults. In fact, my baby just turned 19 today, and she's going off to college. But my responsibility to teach her and to teach the children, my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, is still there, and we have that time. There are great, again, resources on our website, on the store page. There are books you can share with your high school kids. Encourage them to do a report on if they're homeschooled, or even if they're not, encourage them to do a report and turn it into school and see what kind of response they get with their presentation. But there's videos that they can watch the programs, have a movie night, invite your Bible study over, sit down and watch the film, and then have a conversation afterwards. Talk about what you can do in your community. Get involved and find out if there are any anti-Semitic incidents going on. If you don't know of any, maybe contact your Jewish Federation or one of the synagogues and meet with the rabbi or meet with the leadership of the Jewish community. Find out what you can do to help your Jewish community, to let them know you're here, that you're going to help mobilize the community to protect them. So we're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we're going to take your questions. So please, if you have any comments about what was spoken about tonight, but I've got a couple of questions that I received earlier this week, and of course last week we're going to answer Monique's question as well. So let's take a look at this video real quick. I'll be right back. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews never ends only with the Jews. We must strongly stand against any anti-Semitic trends, for if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. If there's one thing history has taught the Jewish people, a place they can go in time of need is essential, and Israel fulfills that role. But the need for a Jewish state is not limited to being only a refuge for Jews. Jewish tradition in Israel grants full rights for women and people of all races, faiths, and gender. This tradition is what often makes Israel among the first countries to send doctors and field hospitals to any place where a natural disaster occurs, utilizing their medical advances to save lives worldwide. Muslims, Christians, and people of every faith, or those of no faith, have the freedom to worship or not worship as they choose. For Muslims, the Jewish state goes out of its way to provide this freedom. For example, every Israeli university gives students the option of deferring their exams during the month of Ramadan. The Knesset calls off all sessions at sunset during Ramadan to ensure that Muslim Knesset members can break their fasts with the traditional iftar dinner. In an open and democratic manner, opportunities for education, advancement, and careers exist for all citizens in the Jewish state. Sadly, such rights and opportunities do not exist in any of the Muslim Arab states. For example, in neighboring Jordan, Jews cannot become citizens. And in Saudi Arabia, no non-Muslim can become a citizen. Saying that Israel must cease to exist as a Jewish state while accepting that other countries define themselves as Muslim is pure hypocrisy. In most of these countries, no rights exist for non-Muslims, women, and the LGBT community. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org.
Thank you again for joining us tonight. So this is the part of our program that is designated for you. This is your opportunity to make comments, ask questions, and so this is my opportunity every week to have that conversation with you. We hear from people all over the world who email me questions from our Focus on Israel show that airs on Daystar on Sunday nights, Saturday nights and Sunday nights actually, Saturday at 5:30 p.m. Central. Check your local listings for Daystar, but Saturday and Sunday evenings, and then we're also on God TV on Wednesday afternoons. Again, check your local listings. But we get questions and comments throughout the week from people who are viewing that or even from tuning in to this PJTN online program. And so we had an email come in from Ann Porter, who is from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I notice, Ann, you are with us tonight, and I want to thank you for tuning in and joining us. And the reason why I've chosen Ann's question to focus on, because I get Ann's question more often than not. And it's critically important that we understand what replacement theology is, because a lot of times you can talk to a Christian and you can say, well, you know, one of the problems we have within Christianity is replacement theology. And they look at me like, well, what is that? But Ann sent me an email. She said, I happened to catch you on Johnny's Table Talk last week. No coincidence, as I am dealing with some questions I have about replacement theology. So I'm glad you were tuning in and you picked up on that replacement theology, because you are not the only one, and many Christians I hear from all the time. God is doing something. He's uncovering these lies and this disinformation that were not intended, but replacement theology is really anti-Semitic. It's jealousy. It's jealousy against the Jews. And there's even a scripture in Isaiah in chapter 11, I believe it's verse 13, where God told the prophet Isaiah that there will come a time in the latter days when Judah will stop vexing Ephraim and Ephraim will stop being jealous of Judah. Well, Christians don't know that Ephraim is the church. Ephraim, Jacob's grandson, when he gave him that blessing before he died, blessed him to grow into a multitude of fish in the midst of the sea. And here we are today. We are witnessing the fulfillment of what God spoke to the prophet Isaiah, where Jews and Christians are uniting together. Evangelical Christians and Orthodox Jews. And we're no longer, we're coming to, just as God told the prophet Zechariah, in the latter days, we would grab hold of the 10 men from the nations would come and grab hold of a tzitzit of a Jew and say, we know God is with you. We want to go with you. If God is done with the Jews, then why would that prophecy, why would he have given that last day's prophecy to Zechariah? The 10 men from the nations would grab hold of their tzitzit. Why would we do that? Because they will teach us Torah. They will teach us how to worship God. They will teach us his ways and how to live according to his ways. So it's all of these things. I mean, you look at these scriptures, and unless you read them in their proper context, most people miss it. So again, I want to just say that I don't believe pastors intentionally, for the most part, intentionally
promote replacement theology. Well, the Jews rejected Jesus, so you know what? God's got it all figured out. Thank God he is God. But he made a covenant, he made a promise, and he's going to keep that promise. But the question was, without going into a lot of detail, here are my questions. So Ann says, I believe that replacement theology is heresy. What do you think? It absolutely is heresy. It is heretical because it goes against the teaching of Almighty God and what he said and what he promised. And to teach anything other, you know, all it takes is just, like I said earlier, all it takes is just a little twist of the truth. It becomes a lie. And it sends, you know, following Torah, keeping the Torah of Moses is like hitting a bullseye. That's exactly what it is. It's hitting the mark. And all you have to do is alter that mark or that arrow ever so slightly with wrong teaching, and you end up being in error. And this replacement theology, the whole mindset that God's done with the Jews, now it's all about the church? No, it never has been. So yes, I do believe it's heresy. Do you have scriptures to base this on? And I'm so glad you asked this, Anne. There are no scriptures to legitimize replacement theology. Think about that. You cannot, if you were to go to your pastor and say, do you believe in replacement theology? And the pastor says, yes, I absolutely do. And you ask that pastor, well, what do you base that on? Where are the scriptures? You can't find them. However, if you go back to the book of Genesis and you read from Genesis to the book of Revelations, you see the whole story laid out, the whole covenant that God made with the nation of Israel. And it was when Christ came to open up the door so the Gentile converts could come in and worship Israel's God. There's always been, there was Ruth, there was Rahab, there have always been converts who decided to worship Israel's God. And so to go and try to find scriptures that legitimize replacement theology, you can't. Your pastor can't. So, and great question. Number two, what do you know about Oxford scholar N.T. Wright? I don't have a lot of background on him, but Anne, tune in next week because I'm going to do some research and we're gonna talk about him on the program next week. So I hope you'll tune in. And number three, any suggestions for talking with my family and other Christians about this theology? Absolutely. So again, what we do, we produce award-winning documentary films, programs. We distribute them around the globe that deal with this issue. And I would encourage you, Anne, and those of you who are on the show this morning with us, or this evening, I'm sorry, with us, go to our store page. There are a lot of great resources there. Order them, watch them, take notes, do Bible study. They are filled with scriptures to back up everything that we are saying. Israel Indivisible is the definitive film about Israel's historical, legal, biblical right to her ancient homeland. The Forgotten People, Christianity and the Holocaust goes into the history of Christian anti-Semitism. So important to watch, to understand why is this division between Jews and Christians. So there's a lot of great resources. Our Focus on Israel shows. Look at all the programs that we've got there. Again, you can tune in to God TV or Daystar, or you can have your own library in your own home. They're only 30 minutes long. They make great Bible study tools. Invite your friends in, watch the show, and then look up the scriptures and have a conversation about it, because that's how we learn. We learn from one another. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It's been great to spend time with you. If you don't have any, if you have any questions or comments, please email me at comments@pjtn.org. Again, if you haven't become a PJTN Watchman, pray about it. I hope that you'll join us and help us to take this important message for such a time as this to the globe, to Christians, Jews, and all people of conscience. And we can't do it without you. So I hope you'll prayerfully consider partnering with me, with PJTN, as we take this battle on. So God bless you. Again, visit us at pjtn.org. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And I look forward to seeing you as we close tonight. I want to show you a video that brought tears to my eyes, and I thought you might enjoy it too. We'll see you next week on PJTN Online.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you and thank you for your support and prayers.